Welcome to Health on the Hill. I'm Mary Agnes Carey. The health law's provisions on contraception coverage have always been controversial, but now the issue is getting fresh attention in the midterm elections. KHN senior correspondent Julie Rovner joins me now with the latest. Hi, Julie.
Hey, Mac.
Democrats, as we know, has been talking a lot about contraception. This is an issue they're very comfortable with, but some of the new messaging is coming from the Republican side. Let's take a look at this ad from Senate Republican candidate Cory Gardner.
What's the difference between me and Mark Udall on contraception? I believe the pill ought to be available over the counter, round the clock, without a prescription. Cheaper and easier for you. Mark Udall's plan is different. He wants to keep government bureaucrats between you and your health care plan. That means more politics and more profits for drug companies.
Cory Gardner and some other Republican candidates in these tight Senate races are talking about birth control being sold over the counter. What's happening there?
Well, it's a very interesting turn of events. Of course, a number of women's health groups, led by the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, have also called for over-the-counter birth control. But there's a little bit of a twist here in the way the Republicans are doing it. What they're trying is to get out from under sort of the issue of the Hobby Lobby case, the Supreme Court case that said that employers, religious employers, don't have to provide contraception, which of course was one of the requirements of the Affordable Care Act. The Republicans are kind of caught between their religious conservative base and women who, of course, like this provision of the Affordable Care Act. So by saying, let's make it over the counter, that will take it out of insurance, and therefore you won't have the issue with the religious conservatives. And it sounds like it would be cheaper for women. Of course, under the Affordable Care Act, it's no cost to women. So it might, in fact, end up being more expensive if you make it over the counter. Now some of the Republicans are talking about, well, making it over the counter but reimbursable, but that of course puts it back into the insurance realm, which is a problem they were trying to get over in the first place.
But is this nuance about the idea that women might pay more, is that getting through to folks? I mean, some of the estimates I've seen are something like $700 a year for just the pill itself.
That's right. And remember, we're just talking about the birth control pill. Only about a quarter of women who use contraception use the birth control pill. There's been a push to use more longer acting forms of contraception, which are more expensive. That's been a barrier. And that was one of the goals of the Affordable Care Act, to make all forms of contraception available and more affordable. So not only would women have to perhaps pay this $600 a year, but it's not clear who, if anyone, would cover the other forms of birth control, things like the IUD or implants. Pretty much this doesn't, as far as the polls I've seen, I'm not sure this is flying with women, whether or not they're sort of aware of it. I think a lot of these Republicans, Cory Gardner, for example, in Colorado, has in the past supported personhood amendments, both in Colorado and at the federal level, that could make some forms of birth control illegal. He's now saying that was a mistake. He doesn't support that anymore. But there's some question as to why all of a sudden you see all these Republicans, and it's getting to be, a half dozen or more Republicans who are making this an issue in their races, coming out, many of them cutting ads, like Gardner, saying, I'm for women, I'm going to make, birth control available over the counter.
And you also did a very interesting story recently looking at Catholic health plans that are now selling health insurance to non-Catholics as well as Catholics, and they're wrestling with this really interesting tension between meeting the demands of the Affordable Care Act on contraception coverage, but also following Catholic Church teaching.
That's right. And, this is another sort of bit of fallout. The Hobby Lobby case was about for-profit insurers. There are another line of cases heading towards the Supreme Court from actual religious insurers, mostly religious hospitals and universities, saying we can't have anything to do with contraceptive coverage, even to the extent of signing a form and sending it to the government saying we object to it. They won't even do that. They say that is a violation of their religious doctrine. On the other hand, you have many Catholic insurers who, as you point out, are selling not just to Catholics, although many of them do sell to Catholics, but in New York, Fidelis, which is a Catholic insurer, was the second most popular plan on the New York Health Exchange. So they're selling to non-Catholics. When they get into the market like that, they have to cover contraceptives, partly because of the Affordable Care Act in half the states. The states require it. So they have found ways over the years, these Catholic health insurers go back a good number of years, to basically, farm that out to a third party, except that in court, that's exactly what some of these other Catholic institutions are saying they can't do. So there's now some questions, looking within the Catholic Church about whether it's okay what these insurers have been doing, because they are not providing the insurance. But they are certainly facilitating the insurance because they have to if they're going to sell to people who are in the regular market.
And in your story, I think you quoted one of the bishops sort of looking at one of these health plans, kind of questioning how they're handling this coverage.
That's right. There's a bishop in Little Rock, Arkansas, which is where CHI, one of the largest Catholic hospital systems, is going to start offering insurance. And they bought a private plan in Little Rock, and that got the bishop down there wondering whether this is okay and how they're going to handle this. And he's actually contacted the Vatican. Apparently he's heard back, and apparently they're still talking. But that's as much as we know about that.
Before I let you go, I want to touch on this recent court ruling that could affect access to abortion in Texas. What's happening there?
That's right. This was a federal appeals court that said that this has been a long-standing, court fight over this Texas law, which has a lot of pieces to it. But this latest piece says that all abortion clinics basically have to meet the same standards as ambulatory surgical facilities, and on most clinics in Texas don't. So the result of this is that it's going to close down or force the closure of all but 7 clinics in the entire state of Texas. Now, obviously, this is only Texas that we're talking about now, but this law has had an enormous amount of publicity, and the idea that abortion could become, very, very, very difficult to obtain in Texas, it's hard to tell if that might spread and, concern women in other parts of the country.
It's certainly something worth watching. Thanks so much, Julie Rovner, Kaiser Health News.
Thank you.